All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Kick off. Bum, 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 bum. This is it. Because sometimes it feels like
that's football.
Yeah, that's football. Because sometimes it feels like politics is like sports, right? You got two teams and a lot of cheering. So this course is called Election 2024. And as I know you all know, it's called Election 2024 because in, what is it, 2 months? September, October. Yeah, just a little over 2 months. 80 days. We have an election, my friends. And this election, there's a lot of chatter about the election. A lot of talking, and for very good reason. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of conversation, a lot of ideas, lots of politics. And when it comes to politics, it's complicated because sometimes things become, well, for lack of a better term, political when there are really important issues at stake. And I think that oftentimes that does a disservice to the issues, because issues deserve to be debated on their own merit and not just like color war. I say color war because my kids were just in camp. Color war, you have two teams, you got one color, you got the other color team, and it doesn't matter what your team does or what the other team does. You want to win, you want them to lose, and that is it. It's not about who had a better song. It's not about who had a better play. It's my song and my play, or our song, our play versus yours, and we're always right and you're always wrong, and that's it. And I think that is part of the challenge when it comes to politics. And so my thought was, let's do a course. I will tell you, a lot of people came over to me and said, what's the plan with the course? What are you thinking? And I'm not going to say that this is a brave course, but it kind of is. Of course I'm not. Of course I'm going to say it. It is. It's a bit of a brave move that we're doing, because when it comes to politics, we know things can get kind of intense and kind of heated. The goal is to create a space, or to have a space, in which we can talk about the issues on their own merit, without partisanship, without politics, without names of candidates attached to the questions. We're going to look at the issues and get to the core of the issues. And we have 5 issues that we're going to deal with. We have the economy, we have healthcare, we have crime and gun control, we have immigration, and we have, what's the 5th? Who can remember the 5th? Abortion. These are the 5 topics we're going to cover, all of them from a unique Torah perspective, from a uniquely Jewish perspective. And when I say Jewish perspective, I don't mean like how the Jews are voting. What I mean is, when I say Jewish, I mean Torah. Like, what does Torah say about the issues? And you might be thinking, well, what does Torah have to say about, I don't know, gun control? And as we'll see tonight, because we're starting with that, Torah has a lot to say about gun control and or gun right. Well, we're going to frame it as gun rights versus gun restrictions. And there's a lot that Torah has to say about this issue. I always begin with a joke. So here's the joke. First Jewish president gets elected. And he calls his mother and he invites her to the inauguration. And she says, I don't know. I don't know if I'm coming. He says, Ma, you got to come. She's like, I don't know what I'm going to wear to the inauguration. He's like, look, I'm going to have the best tailors, like the White House staff tailors, make you something very quickly. She's like, oh, it's quick. They can make it quick. Right? We have a swift tailor. Okay, that's a joke within a joke, or not even. Right? We got something. We got a tailor. He's great. Yeah, but how am I going to get there? We'll send Air Force One to bring you. What am I going to eat? We're going to get kosher deli from New York. We're going to fly it in. It's going to be great. No, so she's there. All right. So she's at the inauguration, and there she is. She turns to the senator sitting next to her, and she says, "You see that man by the podium with his hand on the Bible? His brother's a doctor." His brother. Classic. Taking it with you guys. Classic joke. All right. So all joking aside, politics is obviously, as we know, a serious business, serious issues at stake, and really issues that I think affect the nation as a whole, as we all know. So again, as I mentioned, the goal here is to discuss the issues on their own merit with a unique framework, a Torah framework that really cuts out all like the maneuvering and the politics and this one side versus the other side. And I think we're going to have the opportunity to kind of reset the conversation on a lot of the issues and perhaps get a fresh perspective. So let's jump in. I wanted to begin with a topic that would really, I think, bring out the richness of Jewish thought and Torah thought. And so we're opening up our course or series with the topic of gun control. And it seems like every few weeks, or maybe even, way more frequently than every few weeks, but very frequently, we hear of another shooting, but really another mass shooting. And I did some research in preparation for this. And in the US alone, as of today, there have been 353 mass shootings since January 1st, 2024. So this year in 2024, and we are August 19th. So we're talking about 8 months, right? And 19 days. So there have been 353 mass shootings as defined as a shooting that targets 4 or more people. So 300, it's a big number. And in the last 10 years that these statistics have been followed, there have been a staggering 4,684 mass shootings. So far this year, in 2024, 10,776 people have died by gunshot in the United States alone. And that includes defensive gun use. But 10,776 people have been killed by or have died by gunshot. So these are all big numbers. And every time there is a mass shooting, the debate over guns rages anew. Some shout, we need stricter gun control laws. Some shout, you can't take away our guns. And each side pulls out statistics. Each side shouts. Everyone digs in, and the cycle repeats itself. So again, tonight we're going to look at this from a uniquely Jewish perspective based on Torah teachings, and we'll see that there's a lot to talk about, a lot of insight. As you can see in the book that's in front of you, it's 24 pages of sources. Now, the first few pages are not Torah sources, but I actually want to set out the kind of where things stand in the U.S. currently, and then we're going to get into a Torah perspective. So here's what federal gun law looks like right now. Now, state by state, there might be some distinctions, but this is what federal gun law looks like right now. 3 major ideas. Number 1, the Brady Act requires federally licensed firearms dealers to run instant criminal background checks before selling firearms. So that is part of the Brady Act, which was signed in 1986, I want to say. It was in the 80s. So this is a federal act that if you are, let's say, an official seller of firearms, right? You have a store or you're officially licensed to sell firearms. Well, you must run a background check on a prospective purchaser. That is point number 1. Number 2, there is no federal requirement for background checks or forms or sales records, receipts, or even ID for private party sales of firearms. In other words, we were having a Talmudic discussion in Talmudic lexicon. I would use a phrase that sounds like this. B'med dvarim amurim, point number 1, which means when does number 1 apply that you do these background checks? That's only when it's a licensed firearms dealer. A private party sale, there's no federal requirement to check anything, including ID, which would show age, any information, right? There's no federal mandate for that. Third point, additionally, fully automatic weapons, aka machine guns, are federally banned, while semi-automatic weapons are legal. Now that is on a federal level. There are states that have their own laws, that have their own provisions in there, and districts, but on a federal level, on a national level, semi-automatic weapons are legal. Of course, everyone knows about the bump stocks. Yes, that's what transforms a semi-automatic into what is essentially a fully automatic. That itself is the subject of much debate. As of right now, my understanding is those are legal. At least they're not federally banned. Okay.
That's the guy used in Las Vegas.
Correct. From the casino. Now, let's discuss a little bit about what.
Ari, I have a question. Am
Yes.
I correct that none of these things refer to online sales?
That's a very good question. Online sales, are they of the officially licensed sales category or are they private sales? My understanding is if it's an official weapons dealer, it would be subject to federal requirement of background check, etc. But if it's a private party sale, I think it falls under the, I don't know if we call it loophole, but under the area that does not require anything. It's just cash and a gun. That's pretty much the way that there's no cash and carry. Look at that. Huh. What a tagline. Okay, so that correct, cash and carry. So that is that. Now, let's take a look at a Pew Research Center kind of study. This is going back a little bit. It's going back a decade, but a lot of this still holds true today. So I'm going to read this a little bit longer, and then we're going to I'll kind of send around the text. So here we go. While the issue, this is text number 1. While the issue of gun control remains divisive, there are clear areas of agreement when it comes to a number of gun policy proposals. Fully 85% of Americans favor making private gun sales and sales at gun shows subject to background checks, with comparable support from Republicans, Democrats, and independents. Similarly, 80% support laws to prevent mentally ill people from purchasing guns, with broad support across party lines. So basically, this Pew Research study opens up by essentially saying that there is a lot of areas or a lot of, let's call them issues, in which most people, most Americans actually agree. 85%, 80%, that's not bad. That's a pretty good thing. By the way, just to clarify, I really need to clarify, sales at gun shows, it's not so clear that sales at gun shows do not require background checks. If a licensed firearms dealer is at a gun show, they will still be required to run the background check. It's only independent parties, third parties at the gun show that are not required to run the background check, just like any private party sale. Just to clarify, it's not like gun show is this magic immunity. Oh, you're at a gun show, all right, welcome to the Wild West. It's the same would apply if you're officially licensed dealer versus a private party. Let's continue. But this bipartisan consensus breaks down when it comes to other proposals. 2/3 of Americans, 67%, favor creating a federal database to track gun sales, but there is a wide partisan divide between Democrats, 84%, and Republicans, 49%. A smaller majority of the public, 55%, favors a ban on assault-style weapons. Democrats, 69%, are also far more likely than Republicans, 44%, to support this. Similar partisan divides exist when it comes to banning high-capacity ammunition clips or the sale of ammunition online. The survey finds that 51% of Americans say it is more important to control gun ownership, while 45% say it is more important to protect gun rights. That is pretty close, right down the middle. Hence, there is a lot of area that is really divided and divisive, whereas some areas are pretty much a consensus across the nation and even across parties to some extent. So in order to get into this again from a Jewish perspective, I first want to present a little bit about the current state of federal law. Now, we discussed federal gun laws and restrictions, but let's talk about what the U.S. courts have said about gun rights. And it really comes down to the Second Amendment. So let's get this party started. Mira, would you like to read, please, text number 2, which is Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and we should probably give it its full weight of resonance. I'm kidding. Read it as you wish.
A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Okay, you guys see what's going on there in text 2? You guys see what I see? I see some crazy talk. Sorry, what I mean by that is it is so not clear. Who wrote this? This is supposed to be clear.
We don't see anything.
I see the word militia, which.
One second. Mom, I emailed the file. Can you check your email? I emailed the PDF to you.
Yeah, but I'm on my computer and
I'm not gonna be able to pull it up on this because my setup here, I can't pull it up.
Oh,
So,
all right. All right. If
Yeah.
you could just like read it quickly.
I don't know if I can read it twice, but we'll talk about it. So what's going on over here is that the Second Amendment is mentioning, first of all, it mentions a militia, well-regulated militia, right? And then it says being necessary to the security of a free state. Okay, all right, sure. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So the big question here is, like, again, I'm just viewing this from a Talmudic perspective because that's what the Talmud does. It takes text from the Mishnah, analyzes it, breaks it down, and questions it. I have a simple question, right? I have a question. My question is, are we talking about the right for militias to exist? Is it about a free state? Is militia synonymous with state versus federal? Is that what's going on? A state militia is going conceptually to war against the federal government? Is that what we're trying to ensure that that's possible, to keep checks and balances? But then it switches to the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Again, is that a new thing? Is that the same thing? Is that the militia? Are the people the militia? Are the people the state? And then it ends with just this beautiful flourish, as if like it's almost gaslit. I'll be honest. It's like, shall not be infringed. Like, obviously, don't you understand what that means? And no one knows what that means. How do I know that no one knows what that means? Because this is the subject of a major debate that literally ends, as we'll see soon, in a 5-4 Supreme Court decision, which means even federal judges were this close, the slimmest majority. And we'll talk about DC versus Heller in a second. But it's bananas to think that a national text document as important as the Second Amendment is written so opaquely. Who does this? Now, listen, it sounds like I'm criticizing. I'm just saying it's complicated and it's very hard to figure out. And everyone's got an opinion on it. It definitely means this, definitely means that. I'm just pointing out it's really hard to make sense of. All right, it's really hard to make sense of. Now, let me bring you into the case study of DC versus Heller. What happened in this case? So here's the background. In 1975, the District of Columbia, DC, passed severely restrictive gun laws. They basically said that every firearm, this was 1975, every firearm that's located within the borders of the District of Columbia must be registered with DC prior to the start of 1976. So you have a few months, every firearm must be registered. We want documentation of every firearm within the district. That's number one. Number two, they said no firearms could be registered after the start of 1976. Have a firearm, didn't register it, illegal firearm. This is what DC passed in 75. The third point they said is that you need special license to carry your firearm even at home. Aside from registering, you would need a license to even carry it at home within your own home. And the fourth point of this law of DC in 1975 was that firearms must be kept in your home. If you have the permit registered, etc., it must be kept unloaded, disassembled, or trigger locked. Those were the three requirements of making sure that it's not ready to fire. So that's what happened. In 2004, a fellow named Dick Heller and 5 other DC residents sued the District of Columbia for violating their Second Amendment rights, the right to keep and bear arms. The District Court of DC ruled against Heller and the others. The court argued that the Second Amendment does not provide for the individual's rights to arms, only for the rights of an organized militia like the National Guard. That is literally what the District Court of DC ruled in and around 2004. So Dick Heller and some buddies get up and say, this is illegal, this is unconstitutional, we have a right to bear arms, and this law in DC is preventing us. And the court literally said, you are wrong, Mr. Heller and crew and co, because the Second Amendment does not say that you have the right to keep and bear arms. It talks about a militia, a formal organization, and that ain't you. So you have no grounds. Well, here's what happened. The ruling was appealed, but before we get to the appeal, let's read the original opinion, text number 3. Let's see how long it is. All right, not so bad. Dasi, please take it away, please.
This court is not persuaded that a well-regulated militia being each able-bodied person separate and apart from his or her employment or association with a militia. As the 11th Circuit and the plain meaning of the Second Amendment make clear, a militia must not be a free-for-all. Rather, a militia must be a very well-regulated fighting force, applying at the very least some semblance of organization at the state or local level.
There you go. They said, read the text. The text talks about a well-regulated militia. Boom. That's your gun rights. Your gun rights are protected in the Second Amendment if you are a well-regulated militia. You're a well-regulated militia at home. What's your name? Right? Heller's militia. What is this? You're not a militia. You don't have gun. You don't have the rights to keep and bear arms. That's not a right. That's what the court ruled. Well, the plaintiffs appeal, and it got escalated. They won the appeal. The U.S. Appeals Court for D.C. reversed the ruling, saying that the Second Amendment does indeed protect individuals' right to keep and bear arms because it includes the clause, as we saw, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. And we don't know, is that part of the militia or is that a secondary or an add-on? So the appeals court ruled in Heller's favor. Having lost on appeals, D.C. petitioned the Supreme Court to hear the case. And that's how we have Heller versus the District of Columbia being heard on November 20th, 2007. This is not that long ago. November 20, 2007, in the Supreme Court of the United States. And on June 26, 2008, which is what, 15, 16 years ago? Right, June 26, 2008, the Supreme Court issued its ruling, and by a 5-4 decision, the court ruled that DC's ban on handgun possession and its requirements to keep firearms inoperable even at home violated the Second Amendment. Again, it was a 5-4 ruling. So here is Justice Scalia writing for the majority opinion. This is text 4A, and we're going to read text 4A and 4B. It's a little bit long. I'm going to read these. 4A. This is the majority opinion. Again, just to be very clear before we read it, the majority opinion in the Supreme Court ruling on the case of Heller versus DC ruled that indeed the Second Amendment does provide for the protection of the individual's rights to keep and bear arms. Text for it. The Second Amendment is naturally divided into two parts. Its preparatory clause and its operative clause. The former does not limit the latter grammatically, but rather announces a purpose. The amendment could be rephrased, says the majority opinion, because a well-regulated militia is necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. In other words, since you need to have the possibility for militia, therefore individuals are allowed to keep and bear arms. That is the way that is the ruling of the majority opinion of the Supreme Court. Now, I got to tell you, again, I'm just going to go back to my Talmudic background. This is it's classic Talmudic analysis. You have a vague text or text that can be read in multiple ways. And here you have the court rule, the majority opinion saying it's obvious, naturally divided into two parts. This is the reading. Or not. I mean, but this is the majority reading. Text 4B. Here it continues. We reach the question then, does the preface fit with an operative clause that creates an individual right to keep and bear arms? It fits perfectly. Once one knows the history that the founding generation knew and that we have described above, that history showed that the way tyrants had eliminated a militia consisting of all the able-bodied men was not by banning the militia, but simply by taking away the people's arms, enabling a select militia or standing army to suppress political opponents. This is what had occurred in England that prompted codification of the right to have arms in the English Bill of Rights. Let me just interject for a second. And here we have the court telling us that this reading even makes sense when you look at the historical context within which this was drafted. Look at the historical context. Always militias get shut down if the individuals can't bear arms because they can't gather as a militia. If the people, if the populace is not armed, well, then what are the odds that they're going to be able to get together and form said militia? You have to have individuals bearing arms to form a militia to then create that protection, checks and balances, or whatever. The debate with respect to the right to keep and bear arms back inside, as with other guarantees in the Bill of Rights, was not over whether it was desirable, all agreed that it was, but over whether it needed to be codified in the Constitution. During the 1788 ratification debates, the fear that the federal government would disarm the people in order to impose rule through a standing army or select militia was pervasive in anti-federalist rhetoric. Federalists responded that because Congress was given no power to abridge the ancient right of individuals to keep and bear arms, such a force could never oppress the people. It was understood across the political spectrum, that the right helped to secure, that the right, and it was that right of arms, helped to secure the ideal of a citizen militia, which might be necessary to oppose an oppressive military force if the constitutional order broke down. It is therefore entirely sensible that the Second Amendment's prefatory clause announces the purpose for which the right was codified, to prevent elimination of the militia. The prefatory clause does not suggest that preserving the militia was the only reason Americans value the ancient right. Most undoubtedly thought it was more important for self-defense and hunting. But the threat that the new federal government would destroy the citizen militia by taking away their arms was a reason that right, unlike some other English rights, was codified in a written constitution. Again, an interesting perspective that historically, I mean, the fact that people could or should have the right to bear arms, that was this writing. Scalia he wrote this opinion. It's like, that's obvious. That goes with, they didn't have to write that. They only wrote it so that it would also announce the idea that it's helpful for the militia, but that's not the only reason. There's other reasons, but certainly the individual, it's on every level is understood to have the right to keep and bear arms. But again, it's not the only opinion. There's a dissent. Justice Stevens wrote the dissenting opinion. Here we go, text 5A. I'll read this as well. The Second Amendment was adopted to protect the right of the people of each of the several states to maintain a well-regulated militia. It was a response to concerns raised during the ratification of the Constitution that the power of Congress to disarm the state militias and create a national standing army posed an intolerable threat to the sovereignty of the several states. Neither the text of the amendment nor the arguments advanced by its proponents evidence the slightest interest in limiting any legislature's authority to regulate private civilian uses of firearms. Specifically, there is no indication that the framers of the amendment intended to enshrine the common law right of self-defense in the Constitution. The opinion the court announces today fails to identify any new evidence supporting the view that the amendment was intended to limit the power of Congress to regulate civilian uses of weapons. Unable to point to any such evidence, the court stakes its holding on a strained and unpersuasive reading of the amendment's text. Again, that's his dissenting opinion, which is pretty strong in its dissent. When I say pretty strong, it's saying that there's no evidence to the majority opinion. Again, that sounds kind of strong to me. And essentially, what this argument is saying is that there's no indication that the government or that the Constitution is any way saying that that laws cannot be passed in any way to restrict gun ownership or gun rights, if you call it that should be part and parcel of the ability of a government to do that. Text 5B continues this point. The court would have us believe that over 200 years ago, the framers made a choice to limit the tools available to selected officials wishing to regulate civilian use of weapons and to use the common law process of case-by-case judicial lawmaking to define the contours of acceptable gun control policy. Absent compelling evidence that is nowhere to be found in the court's opinion, I could not possibly conclude that the framers made such a choice. And again, that's a nice way or eloquent way of saying the counter argument, which is 1 second. You're telling me that 200 years ago, the framers of the Constitution and or the writers of the Second Amendment, they had in mind that there should never be the possibility for there to be any, let's just call it quote unquote sensible gun control. That sounds like it's a stretch. I mean, to say that, well, it's enshrined the right and there's no conversation about it because that right is enshrined in the Second Amendment, that seems to be a stretch according to the dissenting opinion. Again, according to the majority opinion, that's exactly what it says. The dissenting opinion says that's not what it says. Yes.
In the majority opinion where he's talking about an ancient right to bear arms, I also kind of feel like, what is the evidence for that? Is that an accepted
I think the
right?
evidence is that it was never provisioned for the contrary. That's what I think. Right? It's like, well, how do we know that there's an ancient right to keep and bear arms? Because who took that away? I don't know. No one took that away. Where was that taken away? So evidently that was a right that people had. So no, but I hear you. That's what I assume. That may not be true. That's what I assume to be true. Okay.
But can I ask something?
Yeah, for sure.
So I think I got hung up in the Second Amendment. So this whole thing, if I understand correctly, if this whole thing is so there is a militia in the state that can stand up against the bigger federal or the whatever, so, but we no longer have militias in every state, or am I?
Well, okay, so a
What
few things.
do-
First of all, that itself is, your question is it about the militia? That's the core of the debate. Some say it's about the militia. Some say that's only one example of what the benefit of having that right is, that you could form a militia. But to your core question, which I think is a very good question, it's like, well, where are these militias and can I join? I know a guy in the woods. I'm kidding, but there is the concept that there should be, I'm just going to use a term, maybe I'm mixing terminology here, but that there should be some checks and balances on the federal government, that all the power should not be ceded to the federal government, that states should maintain their own sovereignty. For example, we use for elections the electoral college system. Electoral college system, even though people say, well, why not just use a popular vote? The point is that every state should vote for its appointed presidential electors. In other words, that every state should say, this is who we're choosing. And so there is something about preserving and even promoting the power of the state. And so that would be part of this, not that anyone's looking for a gunfight, right? But that this is something that is important for states to have some sort of safety net or whatever, that if anything were to happen, there will be a way to defend against a totalitarian government that would say, imagine a federal government that goes rogue, the states would at least have some sort of protection. And there are other laws that also grant sovereignty, as it were, to the state. And this is one of them, using, I guess, old school methods, as it were. Larry, you got something? I see a hand going up.
Yeah. Is there anywhere where it defines what a militia is and what the definition is and what the purpose is?
I do not believe that the federal documents define that. I think that's part of the opacity of the conversation. When I say opacity, I mean the lack of clarity of the conversation. And I think that is literally subject to interpretation. And the cool thing about interpretation is that everyone thinks that they got it right, is that their interpretation is exactly what the people who wrote it meant, because that's how I see it. So obviously that's what they meant. And I just look, again, maybe it's a Talmudic background, but I'm like, okay, I see both ways of reading it. I don't know what they meant. I'm a little disappointed in them. I'll be honest. You should write more clearly. I've heard the theory that they wrote it intentionally in a vague way. And a lot of federal documents were also written intentionally in a way that is open to interpretation, recognizing that there may come a time where it needs to be reinterpreted, and that it would be open to that. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. I don't even know. It's just, all I do know is that when you look at things in our legal system, the Supreme Court has ruled on this. That is, it's a ruling. It's a definitive ruling. I mean, it's a 5-4 definitive ruling. There's still a lot of debate. Clearly, there's a debate in the country every election cycle, and between every election cycle, this issue comes up. This has been a very long intro because literally today's class is not about that. This was all the preamble. It's about the Torah's perspective on gun control, and gun rights or gun rights. So I'm glad that you guys indulged me in just giving some of the background here. But now let's get to the Jewish sources. And the Jewish sources are not going to tell us what the framers, what the authors of the Constitution, the writers, what they meant, or the Second Amendment. It's not going to tell us what they meant. It's going to give us a framework for understanding the important issues. So here we go. I'm going to skip text 686b. We've done enough of that. The core question is, in Jewish law, from a Torah perspective, is there the right to legislate? Is there the right for the courts to limit the power of the individual, etc.? I mean, I think you all know the answer to that right off the bat. I mean, like, if the question is, does Torah believe in the right of the law to limit the free movement, choice, decisions of the individual? Welcome to Judaism. Hello. I mean, like, that's literally the whole Judaism. This is what you can eat. This is what you can do. This is when you can work. This is when you can't work. It's not like, oh, autonomy, do whatever you want. No, that's like literally the opposite of Judaism. So if the question is, can the law infringe on people's individual? Have you read the book? I mean, like the whole thing is about that. Literally, and if you read the Code of Jewish Law, I mean, it's got advice on like when you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing you do, how you get dressed, like what you say, like everything is right. Everything is discussed. And it's like, well, what if I just want to do? I don't know. Not if you read this text will tell you exactly what to do. So like, could the law, it's not again, not about government, right? Could the law say that you may want this, but you can't? Yeah, absolutely. Not a question. Let's take a look at text numbers. And this is even true, not only biblical law. This is like, could the rabbis in a bet din, conceptually, right? Could a rabbinical court come along and pass, right, new provisions, right, curtailing individual rights, i.e. dictating? The answer is yes. Take a look at text number 7. This is Rambam. Norm, do you want to read?
Yeah.
All right, Mark, we're passing it to you. Mark, text number 7 on page 10. Please take it away.
According to the laws which they shall instruct you, Deuteronomy 17:11. This refers to the edicts, decrees, and customs that they instruct people to observe to strengthen Judaism and improve society. When a court sees it necessary to issue a decree, institute an edict, or establish a custom, they must first contemplate the matter and see whether or not the majority of the community can uphold the practice. We never issue a decree on the community unless the majority of the community can uphold the practice.
Interesting. You see that? Now, it's not like God took a poll. Wait, time out. This is not biblical law. This is rabbinic. Takana. I don't know how to say that name. Rabbinic enactments. Let's say enactments, right? So rabbinic law would be, you got to take the pulse temperature of the room. Like if it's something that no one's gonna, like, you can't start making everybody in the wrong. It's like no one's gonna follow it, but it's on the books now. Everyone's guilty. It's not kosher. It has to be good grounds, like valid grounds for making the enactment, but also it has to be something that people can do. So again, conceptually, like could Jewish law come out, like again, if you were looking at this from perspective of Jewish law, could the court come out with a law that restricts the free use or freedom of the individual, et cetera? The answer is yes. It has to, it has to be something that can be feasibly pulled off. So that I think creates a bit of a question,
This makes some sense.
what makes sense? Which part of it?
The majority of people, for example, in most cities in the country, are not within walking distance of a synagogue. Therefore, based upon that, it's okay to drive a shul. If you say that,
Time out. New rabbinic law. Hold on, let me clarify. New rabbinic laws would not be passed by a bet din unless it was determined that folks could follow. Original OG commandment number 4 about Shabbat, that no one's taking a poll over. I'm not getting it to, one way or the other. I'm just saying that there's certain things that would be looked at. Certain things are just, it is what it is, and people do the best that they can without any judgment. But I'm just, a clear distinction between biblical law and these rabbinic enactments. So the core question is, could feasibly, according to halacha, could rabbinic law come out and say, hey, this is something that's dangerous. This is something that we feel needs some restrictions. We're going to create some restrictions around it. Absolutely. I mean, the kosher, right? Chicken is meat. I mean, I sound like the Wendy's commercial. Where's the beef? I'm looking at the chicken parm and I'm asking the question, where's the beef? Remember that the lady, she would say, where's the beef? Pulling some deep recall here from the 80s maybe or whatever. But like, that's a problem. I mean, the Torah says don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. The rabbis came along and said, listen, some people believe, or some people call chicken meat. And therefore, if you can chicken parm, then you might come to beef parm. That's not a thing. You might come to whatever it is, right? So therefore, not that the rabbis didn't know the distinction. The rabbis felt like people would stop having that clear demarcation. Therefore, they said, we're going to rabbinically throw chicken under the proverbial faux cheese bus, whatever that means, and ban chicken and dairy. Why? It's a rabbinic enactment. It's not a biblical law. Rabbinic enactment. And I guess they did a straw poll or whatever it is. They did a poll. People were like, okay, we can do this. We can do this. And that was it. And that's how it happened. I don't know if they would take a modern poll, if it would be the same, but this happened, all the way back in the day.
But I know it's off the subject.
Yeah.
But I think that is a mistake because I've looked into that. I think I've heard this before. Boiling a kid in its mother's milk was something idol worshippers did. It was part of their service. So it has to do more with idol worship than it has to do with boiling with meat and milk.
Valid topic, but let's hold that because it's a long topic. Oh, sure. I know I brought it up. But anyway, the point is that rabbinic legislation is a thing, and conceptually it can be a thing here. The question, therefore, is, well, so there could, according to Judaism, Jewish law, there could be a thing, there could be restrictions levied. The question is, well, but what is Torah and Jewish, classic Jewish thought, does it lean toward gun restrictions or gun rights? Now, I know what you're thinking. Where were guns in Mosaic times? There weren't. But we're going to try to look at the Jewish perspective, Torah perspective on weapons, dangerous things, and try to see if we can come up with some sort of framework. So here's how we're going to do this.
Maybe you could just give an example of the fence on top of the roof as a rabbinic.
That's biblical. Are you saying in general as like idea of a safeguard?
Oh, that's biblical?
Absolutely. Micah is biblical. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Ki yipal hanofa, lest the fall or fall. Yeah. Here's the big idea. Here's what we're going to do now. Just process. This is how we're going to work this for the next, it's perfect time. For the next 40 minutes. We're going to look at 9 different sources within Jewish law. 9 sources. I sound like an infomercial. Not 1, not 2, 9. For the low price of $19.99 in 12 monthly installments. Okay, 9 sources. And each source may indicate a perspective of Judaism toward more gun rights, as we'll apply it on our own, or toward more gun restrictions. So we'll present the source, and then we'll have the chance together to decide, to debate whether the text is advocating gun restrictions or gun rights. Let's go. Let's begin. Source number 1.
Can I take you off the subject? Now, all this stuff real quickly.
Keep us on.
What about Pirkei Avot?
Which
Where
one?
it says, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? Doesn't that say you have the right to carry a gun?
Could be. Hold that thought.
Okay.
We have plenty of good sources. Let's do this. Let's jump into our first source. Weaponry and Shabbat. This is on page number 11. Okay. So here we go. The first source of the 9 that we're going to look at deals with the Shabbat prohibition to carry in a public domain. So let me explain that. There is considered on Shabbat, labor is prohibited, and labor is defined, malacha, labor is defined by 39 specific categories. So you're allowed to schlep a couch from your basement to your attic. That is not considered labor, even if you're going to sweat while you're doing it. Labor has a very specific definition. Prohibited labor in Shabbat is a very specific prohibition. 39 categories of work that they employed in the building of the ancient Mishkan tabernacle. And in the course of that construction, the commandment comes out, oh, by the way, this building project, do not do it on Shabbat, even though it's very important, but stop on the weekend, stop on Shabbat. And so we learn from that the specific areas of labor that are prohibited are the ones that they employed in crafting the Mishkan, crafting the tabernacle, 39 categories. One of them doesn't sound like any work at all. It's literally carrying something, like moving something within a public domain, public thoroughfare, more than 4 cubits, which is 6 feet. So this is a prohibition on Shabbat. And doesn't sound like work if you have conceptually even something in your pocket That could be that problematic within this thing. Now, many major cities, including Atlanta and various communities, have what's called an eruv. An eruv ensures that within it basically transforms it from a public domain to a more of a communal space. That's not a public thoroughfare, and thus one is permitted to transport, to carry within that domain, assuming that there is an eruv up. There is one here in Sandy Springs. There's one in Toco Hills. There's one in Dunwoody, I think maybe there should be. Is there not? No, yes, maybe.
Yeah.
Is there one in Dunwoody? There is one in Dunwoody, thank you. There is one in Virginia Highlands. And so there are in Morningside. Yeah, legit. Okay, now I used to be in charge of the Virginia Highlands Morningside area. So I know it existed. So here we go. Now we're going to look at text number 8. This is talking about when there's no eruv. So now carrying is not permitted. One thing. Clothing and jewelry is not considered carrying. Very important. And maybe very obvious. If you're wearing clothes, you're good. But I'm carrying a shirt. Take it easy. If you're wearing it, it's not called carrying it, you're wearing it. Different category. Jewelry, what if I'm wearing something in my ear? First of all, if I have an earring, that would be interesting. But second of all, right, earrings, jewelry, rings, etc., not considered to be carrying. It's all jewelry. Text 8. Frank, take it away.
One may not go out wearing a sword, a bow, a triangular or round shield, or a spear. Rabbi Elazar says they are ornaments to him, but the sages say they are nothing but a stigma, for it is written, they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning knives. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore.
Classic debate. This is in the Mishnah. Classic debate. The debate is about a sword, a bow, a shield, a spear. Let's just talk about a sword. We'll make it easy. It's the first example. Dude has a sword in his sheath. That's what you put a sword in, right? Got a sword. Are you allowed to carry it on Shabbat? Can you? Why? I don't know. Can you carry it in the street on Shabbat, or is it like carrying? No air. Or is it like jewelry, or is it not jewelry and therefore it's carrying? You with me on the two options? If it's jewelry, then just like you're allowed to wear a watch or a ring or whatever, you can wear the sword. If it's not jewelry, then you're just carrying, and then no way. One rabbi Eliezer says, a sword is an ornament, jewelry, kosher, you can carry it. The majority of the sages say, jewelry, an ornament. What's an ornament? Makes it more beautiful. Weapons are not beautiful. Weapons are, what's the word? Detestable. Am I saying English correctly? Yeah, is that a word? Okay. Weapons are not nice. In fact, we have this prophecy, messianic prophecy from Isaiah that says that when Mashiach comes in the ultimate time, what's going to happen? All of the weapons will be transformed into food, to agricultural supplies, which means that weapons are not an ideal. They're not ornament. You tell me that a sword is jewelry? What kind of jewelry is that? How beautiful is it? Something that's violent. So that's the debate. Yeah.
Like the purpose of this is to be used as a tool. Right, and so you might carry it and consider it an ornament, but its existence is to be used as a tool.
It seems like that might be the debate, where Rabbi Eliezer says, my ornament, right? Look at my sword. It's all special edition, forged Japanese steel. That's the thing, right? Maybe I saw a YouTube video on that once. But the sages say, what kind of ornament? What kind of beauty is it? Look what it does. It's violent. Pause. Mishnah doesn't talk about guns. There's no mention of gun rights or gun restrictions. However, from this text, what can be discerned? Can we come to some sort of, can we extract from here a position or a perspective on the Jewish or halachic Jewish legal perspective on weapons in general, what would you say? Do you think that this text might favor gun rights or might favor gun restrictions based on this text?
Restrictions.
So now you would say restrictions. Why? Because it's not nice. It's not ideal. With, however, the counter argument, hold on, before we get too excited about this, the counter argument is we're not in the Messianic era yet. And if you're not in the Messianic era, it may be not so nice, but it's a necessary evil. Or maybe you don't even call it an evil. Yes, regarding the laws of Shabbat, it's not considered an ornament, but you got to do what you got to do. So it's not necessarily so ironclad. It's not a slam dunk case. It's not so super clear that weapons need to be necessarily restricted. Sure, on Shabbat, there's a restriction according to the halakha, according to the majority opinion, which we rule by. However, there is not living in a non-ideal world in which violence is a reality. That doesn't necessarily say that therefore weapons should be overall restricted as opposed to just restricted on Shabbat vis-a-vis carrying. You with me on this? It's not conclusive from that source, even though it may seem to tilt the needle a little bit. It's not 100% conclusive. Yes.
But I thought that there is one overriding concept that if it saves a life, you can break the commandment.
Correct.
So based upon that, if carrying a gun could save a life, you can. I'm just saying.
Correct. I have literally been asked this question, not regarding a gun, but regarding a cell phone, from a young man, Shabbat observant. This is back in Virginia Highlands. He asked me. He was planning on walking, outside the Eruv. Let's say walking from Virginia Highlands to Toco Hills, although they have their own Eruv, they're not connected, right? There's actually an area of water where the Eruv does not go over, somewhere cutting in between the two. And so he asked me, or maybe he was walking to Midtown, like deep into Midtown where there was no. And he asked me, can I, and he felt a little unsafe, can I carry a cell phone in case I need it? Otherwise, he wouldn't carry it. Like he was, Shabbat observant on that level. He wasn't, he wouldn't feel comfortable doing it. But he asked in the context of danger. So I told him, I told him, first of all, I don't know that I can render a decision based. But yes, if it's literally for protection and that's where we're up to, then yes, life supersedes Shabbat. Correct. I don't think we're talking about a situation where the sword bearer feels that his life is imminently at risk. Then it's not a question about ornament or non-ornament. It's literally you protect life, etc. You violate Shabbat. This is more of a question.
I have a slightly different question.
Yeah.
So are we to presume from this argument that back in that day, they weren't worried about fill in the blank, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Moabites, the Jebusites, the whomever's coming and attacking them in the base of Mikdash while they were worshiping?
The implication is exactly that the question of the Mishnah is not in a situation at a time of war when, can you carry your weapon with you? The answer would be, in that case, it's not a question. The answer is yes. The question is, in a situation where there's no imminent or present danger, can you, because that's what you do, you're a swordsman or whatever, can you just carry your sword because that's the thing and that's your ornament? Or is it considered carrying? And that's literally the debate where one rabbi says, yeah, that's literally how you roll. That's your garb. That's your dress. That's your ornament. And the rabbis say, but that's so not nice. That's your ornament? Find another ornament, bro. Like, yes, if you need it, you need it. But find another ornament. That's like something that we're looking to get away from. But again, as we apply it to our question, it's inconclusive because we do live at a time when there's violence and there may be a need, and therefore in a situation where there might be a need, it doesn't necessarily say that we should therefore restrict the use, restrict the carrying of. That's a little inconclusive. Let's continue with our next text. This is the next source, which is source number 2 of our discussion. And this is about the Philistines. So this is literally what just came up in conversation about enemies and about making sure that one is armed in case of enemy attack. This is literally a text that deals with that from the book of Samuel. So it's in Tanakh, it's in scripture, the books of the prophets. And here we go. Mitchell, Text
There's
9.
no blacksmith to be found, all of them in Israel, because Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make swords or spears. All the Israelites went down to the Philistines to sharpen their plowshares, picks, axes, and sickles. So on the day of the battle, neither sword nor spear was found in the hands of any people with Saul and Jonathan, but Saul and Jonathan, his son, did have weapons.
So here we have a biblical tale of what happens when the enemy that seemed to have had some sovereignty and some control over the land at that point in time, what you think Israel and the Philistines, but that's a new problem? You think that's it? I'm not saying everyone is the same, folks, but like Pelishtim, that's, I'm sure you know what that is in English, right? That this is conflict is nothing new to the area, but at that time, the Philistines had the control, had some level of sovereignty over there, or whatever it is, control, where they literally banned the possibility for the Jewish people to have manufactured set of their own weapons, to the point that if you had to sharpen your challah knife, I'm paraphrasing here for a moment, right? If you had to sharpen your knife, my wife started making sourdough. I'm just going to jump in on this for a quick second. Have you ever tried to cut sourdough? Oh my gosh. I need an electric saw that is Shabbat friendly. I don't know if they make that. They don't. It's fantastic stuff. She just started making a few weeks ago. But like that thing, it's like a prank. It's like the first week, it's like the sourdough, let's cut into that. And I'm like, okay, this is going to take a while. I feel like Paul Bunyan, but I'm not. And this is like, what is going on here? The thing does not cut. Either I need a I got to go out to the Philistines to get my knife sharpened, apparently, or I'm just going to, and I subsequently decided, just going to cut a regular challah and then send it into the kitchen with I mean, she likes cutting it. She's got it. So like, all right, that's how we're going to do it. I'm just going to cut this easy slice piece. All right, back to the story. The Philistines controlled the iron market. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but there are no weapons, and that created a problem. What was the problem? The Jews couldn't defend themselves. So this is positioned in scripture as a problem when the people don't have weapons to defend themselves. Kind of sounds like Second Amendment, right? A well-regulated militia, ... So based on text number 9, what would you say? Does the text advocate gun restrictions or gun rights? What do you think? No, restrictions are implied here as being a negative, because the Philistines were the ones restricting the Jews. It's not a good thing for the Jews. So you would say, yes, correct. The text is talking about a restriction, but it's portrayed in a disadvantageous way for our people. So it seems to advocate that having a weapon at the ready is a good thing. Restrictions are bad. Individual freedom for weapons is a good thing. Okay, that's what it would seem. The counter argument, again, just because we have counter arguments here, is that, yeah, well, maybe that's when you're battling an enemy in hostile territory and in a hostile environment, but that doesn't apply in the democratic nation domestically that we live in. Although one could argue, no, it absolutely does apply, but I think there, it's not. You have, yeah.
I was just gonna say, it does imply that, I mean, there's a battle, so it implies that they're actually a military, not just a militia.
Correct. So exactly, and that's the counter argument, as I'm saying. So on the one hand, you could say, here's a clear source that weapons restrictions are bad for the people, because look at what happened when our own people were not allowed to have weapons. It wasn't good for us. So let's allow that to happen. But again, the counter of that is, well, that was in the context of a war against the Philistines, whereas a time of peace in a domestic country shouldn't have this. It doesn't mean that therefore it should also be wide open. Again, the point is, I'm not saying yes or no. I'm saying it's, again, inconclusive. This text does lean, again, if we're talking about needles, it leans a little bit toward the non-restrictive side. But again, you can flip it back and say, well, it's different. Okay, let's look at our third text. Okay, this is classic. Okay, let me give you a little background. Lemech. Oh, what a lemech. You know, there's actually an expression, a Jewish expression, lemech, a lemechel. Ever hear that expression? A lemechel? All right, it's fine if you have it. A lemech means someone who just can't get it right. Yeah. Lamech was the grandson of Cain. Remember Cain? Adam had a few sons. Cain and Abel, Cain and Hevel. Cain was the older son. Abel was the younger son. The older son, after a dispute over a sacrifice, murders his own brother, kills his own brother. Okay, so now he begs God for forgiveness. God basically banishes him to some sort of exile and wandering. He has a family. Lamech is his grandson. So there's Cain, the first guy who killed someone in history. And then you have his grandson, his Enochel. His grandson is Lamech. Okay, here we go. Amy, please read text 10a, and then maybe we'll see. We'll see about text 10b.
Adad bore Yavel. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and raise cattle. His brother's name was Yubal. He was the father of all who play the harp and flute. Zillah too bore Tubal Cain, who forged all kinds of tools out of bronze and iron. And Tubal Cain's sister was Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, Adad and Zillah, hearken to my voice. Wives of Lamech, hear my words. Have I slain a man by wounding him, a child by striking him?
Okay. So, first of all, what's up with that? With any of that? Can you draw a family tree based on text 10a? If you can, you are way more talented than I am, because I don't have this. Here's the deal. Here's what we know. Lamech was Cain's grandson. He had 2 wives and he had 4 kids. That's a little bit of the family tree. He had 2 wives and 4 kids. Here's what happens next. What happens next is that his wives, Ada and Zillah, criticize him for teaching weaponry. And thus, if you look at the last paragraph, he tells his wives, Ada and Zillah, hearken to my voice, wives of Lamech, hear my words. Have I slain a man by wounding him, a child by striking him? All I'm doing is teaching weaponry, maybe creating weapons. That's it. Take a look at text 10b. If you don't mind, one more, please.
Lamech was very wise in many different areas of creative work. He taught one son herding, the other music, and the third to manufacture and sharpen swords, pikes, spears, and other weapons. His wives were afraid that he would suffer divine punishment for bringing war and death to the world. They accused him of perpetuating the negative legacy of his ancestor Cain, the first murderer. He responded to them, unlike Cain, I have not slain a man by wounding him or a child by wounding him. God will not punish me as he did Cain, but surely protect me. His argument was that even without a sword or spear, one could kill by wounding and battering his victim, which is worse than dying by the sword. It is not the sword that kills, its manufacturer commits no sin.
This is the Ramban. This is from the 1200s. Guns don't kill people. People kill people. It's literally, he's saying this is not even the 1200s. This is a commentary from the 1200s explaining what happened at the beginning of humanity, of humankind. Lamech is teaching weaponry, teaching how to manufacture weapons. His wives say, what's going on? Can't you find some honest work? What are you doing? It's violent. It's creating death, creating loss of life. He says, what? You're telling me just because we're making weapons that we're taking lives? What are you talking about? It's not the sword that kills. Its manufacturer commits no sin. People kill, not swords. Okay. All right, here we go. Here's my question. My question is the same for all the sources. Does this source seem to indicate, point 2, favoring gun restriction? Sorry, gun restriction or gun rights? What do you think?
Gun rights.
Restriction?
Depends if you're the wife or the husband.
That's the answer. That's the answer. Who was right in the argument? We know who spoke last. We don't know who was right. The wives are saying restrictions. He's saying rights. Perfect. I don't know. But it's an interesting debate. The debate's not new. The debate's old. So here's another text. That seems to be Adan Zillah are advocating weapons restrictions. They're saying less weapons, restrict weapons. Who should have them? Who should make them restricted? And Lemech says weapons rights.
But-
And it's not clear yet.
Before the wives' perspective,
Yeah.
Lemon's perspective is spoken of, it's upfronted by saying Lemech was very wise in many different areas of creative work. It says he was wise,
Interesting. Yeah.
which to me says,
Yeah. So it may sound like a positive,
Yeah.
a virtue. Although you have many wise people that do many terrible things.
That's correct.
Or moral work, right? Creative work is not the same as morality, as we all know. Okay, good. Let's keep on moving. We have a bunch more text. Let's now look at source number 4. Remember, we have 9 sources. We'll see if we can finally hone in on one that's more definitive than the others, but what the journey continues. Source number 4. Okay, source number 4 is about self-defense. Joel, take it away. Text 11.
Assaulted Indian have break them. Why? For they are assaulting you. There the sages taught, someone comes to kill you, you should arrive first to kill him.
Mark, I think this is what you're referring to. The mitzvah or the permission and even the calling for self-defense. So we have here this biblical teaching. The Midrash says it's a biblical mitzvah. If someone comes to kill you, you should arise first to kill him. Self-defense. What is the implication? How do we apply this to weapons and or to guns? Does this text advocate gun restrictions or gun rights? What do you think?
Gun rights.
Gun rights, all right? If you need to have the means to preempt harm to yourself, you probably need a weapon. You probably need a tool at your disposal for self-defense.
You could restrict the Midianites.
The counter, what? Let me say it. The counter argument is you need a weapon because they have a weapon. What if no one has a weapon? Wouldn't that be a better world? And then the counter argument to that is only the bad guys will get the weapon. We know how that goes. But what's interesting here, again, it's a clear source on halakha and Jewish law that habal laharga hashkem lareg, where if somebody comes at you, you should rise first, preemptively even, to strike them in order to prevent an attack or an assault. And that might imply that, yes, you therefore need to have a weapon. Many, I don't know the numbers, but many in our country have weapons or a weapon at home or whatever it is for this very purpose of self-defense. It might be a baseball bat. It might be, or I don't know, maybe that's old school, like just on the cartoons or whatever. Right, but people have something at the ready, maybe by the bedside, whatever it is, just in case someone comes in, etc. So this again seems to advocate for having the means and the ability to be able to defend oneself. Although again, the counter argument is that more guns may make danger more prevalent in the first place. The bad guys have guns, more guns is not good yet.
I guess, sword training like back then, because I know part of the gun debate today is that, whether or not people should be able to buy guns is part of the debate. Another part is the fact that people
Qualified.
don't necessarily need to be trained or qualified or have any knowledge of how to use the gun or work the gun or even.
I don't believe there's any discussion. Wow, hold on. Source 7, where we talk about having dangerous canines at home and what your obligation is to make sure that your dog is not going to harm others. So there is something about, okay, hold that thought. It's a good question. As far as your direct question about gun training and sword training and making sure that you're proficient handling a weapon and only then can you have one, I don't believe that that's a halakhic mandate. Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is gonna be a little off the subject, but based upon this about assault Midianites to strike them, that they're assaulting you, this sounds like it's a mitzvah.
Correct.
To have a preemptive strike.
Correct. Yes. 100%. Yes. We talked about that in the course in the seminar we just did on Israel. How's your wins? 100%.
Yeah.
The idea that you should wait to get hit first and only then, listen, this is going to take us a little, this is going to take us a little too far, but the idea, and it's also important. It doesn't say strike first. It says you should rise to strike first. If the other guy knows that you are ready to preempt, guess what might happen? They might not go in the first place. It doesn't say strike first, rise to strike first. There's a difference. There's a nuance. If you show a strength, or if the other one knows that you're not going to wait for them to get then it's a bit of a different calculus. Anyway, there's a lot to discuss about. Okay, it's basically an analysis of 67 and 73. If we want to speak about Israel and how those two wars went and what the implication is. The goal would be to reduce casualties across the board. Because if no one strikes anyone, that's good. That's good. We may call that a Cold War, but you know what? Cold Wars are probably better than the opposite, right? Better not to lose any life. If everyone's afraid of the other guy, that's actually a good thing. All right, back to the story. So let's continue with source number 5. Okay, here we go. Source number 5. The Exodus. Oh, we all know the story of the Exodus, right? That's easy. So here's how, I'll just read now. Here's how the Torah describes the Jewish people as they left Egypt at the time of the Exodus. Text 12, page 17. God led the people around by the way of the desert to the Red Sea, and the children of Israel were armed when they went up out of Egypt. The children of Israel were armed. Okay, so does it seem to advocate for gun or weapon restriction or rights? What do you think? Rights, that would be the obvious answer. However, the counter argument is no. Maybe that's only in the context of the Exodus when the Jews were going out of Egypt and would soon perhaps face warring nations on their march to the land of Israel. In other words, maybe in the context, as kind of what we said before, in the context of war and battle, like the Philistines that we talked about within Israel, that happened later on in history, not that long after, but later on in history, decades later, we might say the same thing is true with the emerging people. They needed to carry weapons because they were going to face hostile nations and face the prospect of war, and therefore they had to be protected. But a nation at peace, people living in their homes, in the burbs, I'm kidding, I added that on, but people living at their homes, who says that there's a Jewish teaching or Jewish advocacy for having weapons, for having a gun? Maybe it's restrictions, not rights. Okay, let's continue. Source number 6. Danger at home. There's a fascinating, oh, Mom, look at this. Look at this, guardrails. Look at this. Look at this. She's literally reading into this. Okay, text 13 talks about the guardrails. The Micah, the guardrails on the roof. All right, here we go. Page 18. It is a positive commandment for one to build a guardrail for his roof. As it says in Deuteronomy, you shall make a guardrail for your roof. They should not cause blood to be spilled in your house. In other words, basically just simply like don't have a roof that just drops off. Because then someone's going to go up on your roof and say, I love the view, drinking a beer or two. And then, boom, and now it's your liability. That's not good. You don't want that on your conscience or on your insurance. This requirement applies to a roof, and similarly to any, listen to this, any place that might present a danger and cause a person to stumble and die. For example, if a person has a well or a cistern in his courtyard, he must erect a sand wall 10 handbreadths high around them or make a cover for them so that a person will not fall in and die. If you have a ditch in your property, you gotta fence it off or put some sort of, signage and protection. Similarly, it is a positive mitzvah to remove any obstacle that could pose a danger to life and to be very careful regarding these matters. As it says, beware for yourself and guard your lives. If a person leaves a dangerous obstacle and does not remove it, he negates the observance of this positive commandment and violates the negative commandment, do not cause blood to be spilled in your house. So therefore, it is important to make sure that one's physical property is free of any dangerous things, any elements or points of danger. And I ask you, according to this, the positive commandment to clear away any dangerous stuff, the negative prohibition of keeping something dangerous at home. You cannot do that, right? So based on this, does it seem to advocate on the side of gun rights or gun restrictions? What would you say?
Restriction.
Restrictions. It seems pretty clear, right? However, it's not so clear still. Why? Because Jewish law doesn't ban the dangerous object. It just mandates us to apply safeguards, which means that the same might apply to guns, weapons in our homes, that it might be that we are permitted to have them in our homes, but maybe they need to be safeguarded. Like whether that means they're kept out of reach of children, or left unloaded and or disassembled, can be debated what that means. Maybe you need a lock or something. There's a lock you have to get in. So,
but it says if a person leaves a dangerous obstacle and does not remove it, so a dangerous, you cannot consider a gun dangerous.
So I'm saying so again, at first glance, this text seems to be advocating strongly for safeguards.
Yeah.
And the counter to that is, okay, but it doesn't say you can't have it. It just says you have to safeguard it, which, by the way, still advocates for safeguards. It just says you can have, but it has to be safeguarded. So I feel like this is a text. Finally, we're getting somewhere with this. We found a text that is a little informative about something very similar to our case. Now, I have to say this, it might seem like this is a tedious process. We're looking at different sources. And part of this experience is to almost bring all of us into the process of how Jewish law is figured out and or applied. You have an ancient text, ancient system of law, and very modern cases. And so how do you, and a lot of that is by looking at precedent or other cases that have certain similarities and then discussing and debating how similar is it to the case at hand. Can it prove definitively or can it be not proven? I think what's clear in this text, I think we finally hit a text that's a little bit more direct. This text says that it's not that you can't have something dangerous at home. You can, but you have to safeguard it. You have to take precautions to make sure that no one is harmed or can be harmed by your dangerous item, Joel.
Deaths by gunshot.
So you're saying that even if you have your own pass code or whatever, it's still dangerous. Okay, good. So saying maybe the only way to prevent the danger is not to have it at all. Okay, that could be an argument. The counter could be, we didn't say not to have a ditch in your home to put up. If someone still harms themselves with a safeguard, what are you going to do? You can't prevent all harm. You can at least put a safeguard, and maybe that's the only. I'm just saying that would be the nuance. Yeah.
At least 10 years ago, maybe 15. Is someone in Israel invent a fingerprint sensitive trigger lock? I don't know if anything came of it or not.
I don't know.
But this was something which for real wasn't invented in Israel. I was curious if that's maybe why.
Technology exists. Yeah. Okay. By the way, I think this is one of the areas in which I can't say, I don't know the numbers. I don't want to make up like poll numbers, but I think many Americans agree that that reasonable safeguards is not a bad thing, and even something that's quite sensible. Now let's keep on going. Let's keep on going to the next source. Oh, here we go. Oh, this is actually one of my favorite sources. The dangerous canine, dangerous dog, having a wild, dangerous animal in your home. Take a look at text 14a. The Gemara, the Talmud discusses this. Text 14a, page 20. One should not keep a dangerous dog unless it is kept on a chain. One may, however, keep it in a town adjoining the frontier, keeping a chain during the daytime, but releasing it during nighttime. Wow. Interesting frontier exception to the rule. I guess the frontier, you might be attacked by I don't know, marauding anti-frontierists, which is not a phrase that anyone has ever said, but those that wish to attack your frontier. So if you're on the edge, if you're on a border town, whatever, you're on the frontier, then you can allow your dog to roam at night to protect the frontier. But otherwise, a dangerous animal, either you can't have it at home or it's got to be kept on a chain. Well, that's pretty, I will say that's pretty direct. Take a look at text 14b. Here, Rabbi Yaakov Emden, look what he writes. It seems to me, page 21, that despite the permission to own a dangerous dog, one should not own more than the one needed to protect one's home. It is forbidden to own many dangerous dogs, even if they are chained. Multiple weapons. Okay, unless one owns numerous homes and properties that require a dog, or one is a shepherd who requires more than one dog, even for one flock of cattle. The principle is that to own more than is necessary is not allowed under any circumstances. Wow. Now, if I were to ask you, just generally speaking, does this text and the halachic response from Rabbi Yaakov Emden, the Talmudic text and the addendum to that, does this seem to point the needle toward rights or restrictions? What would you say? Restrictions, pretty clearly, restrictions. Oh, why?
Because a dog has its own actions.
Good, excellent.
A gun does not.
Perfect. But hold on. Before we get to it, let me just unpack it a little bit, then we'll get to that point. So to unpack it a little bit, what's clear is that if you have, like we said before, about a pit, a roof, whatever, a dangerous thing in your home or around your house or on your property, you have to safeguard it. If you have a dog that's dangerous, could bite, could attack, could maul, God forbid, you have to keep it on a chain. You're having it not just because it's a pet, it's because it's what is it? Protection, right? Beware of dog. So you have that. So it's a reason. It's self-protection or deterrence, whatever it is. So yeah, okay. However, you have to safeguard it like we saw before, so it's consistent. But then Rabbi Yaakov Emden adds another provision. He says you can't have more than one. Interesting. Why can't I have more than one? He says you can't. You can't. Why not? Because you don't need it. Why? I need multiple dogs. You don't need multiple dogs. Take it easy. Have one with the minimum that you need. If you have multiple houses, yes. If you have multiple properties, sure. If you have big property, you might need more than one. But otherwise, one.
Just say a dog has its, has its own ability to act, right?
That's what Mark said also.
Like, having a gun that you can easily access from wherever you are in your house means that whatever is happening might be multiple weapons.
Correct. Yeah. That's the point. Yes. Correct. So there's a distinction. There's also, I think, that the biggest distinction, or another distinction, is what Mark said, which is that the dog on its own could attack, whereas a gun on its own cannot attack. It's by human intervention that the gun will fire.
Can act on its own. You need to be able to access it from wherever you are.
Right. It can't just run over to the protection.
Go to the basement, but I'm upstairs on the third floor.
Right. So you may need, right. So the gun downstairs is not going to help. It's repeating it. It's not going to help for upstairs. Good. I think the key here is applying it. If we apply it directly without kind of thinking about the other things, it would say, only one gun and it has to be locked down. But the counter argument is, again, one gun is different than one dog. The dog can move, the gun can't. And unlike dogs, guns don't go off on their own, or maybe, it's, again, dogs have their own volition. Okay. So again, I think we can extract some kind of sentiments that we see within Jewish law. We can get a perspective, even if it's not a one-to-one comparison. There's a sense that we're getting about sensible protection and restrictions. Okay, now let's take a look at, we're going to go really quickly because we're at the time. We're going to go very quickly to sources 8 and 9. 8 has to do with market restrictions. Here's what Jewish law says about selling weapons to certain individuals. So this is restrictions on weapon sales. Okay, text 15a, Talmud. We may sell to idolaters neither arms nor accessories to arms, and we may not sharpen arms for them. Look at that. Talk about a little anti-Philistine or Philistine comeuppance. We don't sell to those that might wish us harm. I mean, idolaters. I mean, so we care about someone's theology. This means someone who may be an enemy to our people. So we don't sell them arms or accessories, nor do we sharpen their weapons. Again, it makes sense. Text 15b, Rashi. The purpose of these restrictions is to prevent them from harming Jews. So again, in the act under the guise for the purpose of self-protection, self-preservation, we do not aid and abet, if that's the right term. We don't arm the enemy. That is foolish. The Talmud continues that this is true even Jew to Jew. Jew to Jew sales.com. 15c. Rav Dimi, son of Abba, said, just as it is forbidden to sell arms to idolaters, it is forbidden to sell them to Jewish bandits. Who are the Jewish bandits, you ask? I don't know.
Murder Incorporated.
Murder Inc. Oh, yes, that's true. Yeah, Mylensky.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you know of a Jewish bandit, as they say in Yiddish, a bandit. So what happens? Don't sell them arms. It's dangerous. Don't sell to an enemy from without or from a violent individual within. Again, isolate this text. Are we talking about rights or restrictions? Help me out here. Kind of obvious. It's restrictions, right? We're dealing with restrictions. No selling weapons to people we suspect who might use them for nefarious purposes or harmful purposes. Now, the question, though, is vis-a-vis background checks. Does that mean, though, that you don't sell it to only those that you know are criminals, or does that mean that you run everyone through a criminal database? You understand the distinction? The Talmud only said if one is known to be a bad actor, you don't sell it to them. But the background check is saying someone that we don't know, we are concerned that they might be a bad actor, so run it through. The question is, would halacha advocate for that level of screening? Yes? You with me on my question? Or only if it's known, if a bad actor is known, then we nix it, yes.
Wait, what implies that it's only to people who are known? Because it just says idolaters.
Yeah, but when you know, you know. No, I'm kidding. It's the understanding of this is that the idolater, that's just the standing term for the hostile person, or the dangerous person from without, or the dangerous person from within. So I actually see your question. Your question is, well, maybe 15a is the unknown that is we're looking at skeptically, but then, it doesn't say that you should look into, it just says that you shouldn't at all. There's a clear and outright ban. I think what we have in our country is this idea that we're going to look into you and then figure out whether or not you are or not dangerous. Maybe you can say that's exactly what we're saying, and in known quantity, then you don't. But if it's unknown, then obviously you would have to find out where they stand, on which side of the divide. Are they with us or are they against us? I mean, that would be a reasonable thing. And maybe it could be applied one-to-one, apples to apples. I don't know. It's a good point.
So are
Yeah.
So are we allowed to feed the Palestinians?
Oh, well, we're not going to get it.
I just threw it out.
This is about weapons. This is about weapons. Now, let's take a look at the final text, the final source number 9. 9 sources. It's a lot of sources. Cities of refuge. Just last week's Torah portion talked about cities of refuge. Speaking of which, wow, look at this, 16a. We may not sell in the cities of refuge were havens, safe houses, havens, for individuals that committed, I don't know, that sanctuaries. Well, but that's no, cities of yes, they were spaces, cities of refuge, where people who had brought about loss of life unintentionally. In other words, someone else lost their life due to their actions, but they didn't mean to do it, where they had refuge. However, take a look at this, 16a. We may, Talmud, again, Gemara, we may not sell in the cities of refuge weapons or hunting gear. This is the position of Rabbi Nehemiah, but the sages permitted. So now again, we have a debate. These debates are not new. Debate is in a city of refuge where you're dealing with the populace of folks that have tasted the maybe not murder one, but some sort of manslaughter or whatever. So now, I don't know if I'm saying the right term, manslaughter. I'm not sure about the legal distinction right now. But the point is, one rabbi says not to sell weapons, but the sages, that's Rabbi Nehemiah, but the majority say it's fine. Text 16b, Rashi, the commentary of the Talmud says, Rabbi Nehemiah's rationale is so that the avenger, should not purchase weapons in the city and kill the inadvertent killer. We're concerned that maybe a relative of the deceased would come in, purchase a weapon like that from the corner store, and then go hunt down the one who caused whose the death happened through. In terms of the avenger coming to the refuge city with weapons, that would be noticed, and the weapons would be confiscated upon arrival. Look at this. Talk about security by the borders. Look at this. The concern that the avenger would come into the city of refuge with his or her own weapon, that we have a plan for, because we have metal detectors, we have pat downs, we have the wands, beep, beep, right? We have all that stuff. All those provisions are in place. Not a problem. The concern is that once you're on the inside, if we're selling weapons in stores, then they can buy the weapon right there. That would be crazy. It's like selling box cutters in the airport. That would be nuts. We don't do that. That doesn't make any sense, right? Yes, right. Okay. So that's halacha. So again, based on this, is halacha Jewish law leaning toward restriction or non-restrict or rights? What do you think?
Restriction.
Well, according to Rabbi Nechemi, but if you notice, the sages permitted, so that was a bit of a trick question. The sages said it's not a problem. Rashi explained Rabbi Nechemi's opinion, but the halakha is actually not like the individual opinion; it's like the majority. Hold the question for a second. Let me just round this out because I do want to close out. So here we go. What we've seen from here is obviously that there is. I mean, what's clear is that there's no clear conversation in halacha, in rabbinic law, in Talmudic law, etc., about gun control. That was not a thing. That was not the challenge of the day. They had other challenges, and they did talk about weapons. And how to exactly apply it to 2024, to the questions and the issues that our country faces when you have what's going on out there, and you have, the concerns on, all around. So it may not be applicable one-to-one, but we do have a number of takeaways that I think are pretty conclusive. And I've distilled into 5 what I think are pretty clear and conclusive takeaways. Number 1, weapons are not ornaments. They are a blemish in society. Okay? Reminding us that the world is not where it needs to be. In other words, do we celebrate weapons? Look at my weapons. It's not an ornament. It's not an ornament. In Jewish, it may be a necessary evil that we talked about before, but it's not an ornament to say, right, look what so that's okay, that's clear. Number 1. Number 2, weapons are necessary to overthrow oppressive and corrupt regimes that we saw with the Philistines, right? That seems also pretty clear, that you may need to be armed to be able to overthrow something corrupt, an enemy, etc. Number 3, third conclusive takeaway. When someone comes to kill, one must be prepared to kill preemptively, which may include having the means to do so. So again, that seems to be clear. Number 4, as with all hazardous objects, steps must be taken to ensure that guns do not harm innocent people. Now, what does that mean exactly? To what level are we being restrictive? Or I don't know. We have to figure that out. But the general notion that I think is very clear is that we have to take steps to ensure the safety of, like anything that has potential for danger, we got to ensure that it is safe, that it's safe for others around. And number 5, steps must be taken to ensure that guns do not end up in dangerous hands. That seems clear from all of the texts. With that being said, in the final analysis, I do think that Torah, halacha, Judaism, Jewish thought presents what I call a reasonable framework. On the one hand, you sometimes need weapons. We don't want to have it, but you need it. On the other hand, we got to have safeguards and sensible protections. Jewish law teaches that weapons are sometimes necessary for protection and self-defense, while also teaching common sense safety measures. And I think that if we cut through the politics and the this side or the that side, I think most of us within some range could come to a place where we say, look, we understand the value. Some may argue for the necessity of whatever. At the very least, we can say that being said, it's taking steps to reasonably safeguard, protect, etc., seems to be something that Jewish law would be behind. Of course, it's our hope, I think all of us collectively, that we come to that time that the prophet Isaiah references a time when indeed the swords will be turned into plowshares, i.e., the machineries of death will be transformed into machineries of life, giving sustenance. May that time come very soon, when on a budget level, on a manufacturing level, on a resource level, everything will be directed toward life and positivity and away from areas that take away life. And may that time come very soon. And may we be part of making it happen. Thank you. And let us say amen. Thank you for joining me tonight. If you have any questions, we can stay and schmooze. Otherwise, I do want to mention that next week we are talking about immigration, the immigration debate. What you will find is that there are tremendous sources within Jewish thought about the immigration debate, about immigration, whether you open borders or close borders. This is a question that has come up before within Jewish communities. There have been many instances in which Jewish immigrants have arrived at countries, and we know a lot of famous stories in both modern and ancient times. We'll be looking at the sources and hopefully, once again, extracting principles. Again, this course is not promising solutions in the practical, okay, here's the policy that we're rolling out, but a framework, a sensible framework that we can hopefully work in and with. And when I say we, I mean, who are we that are working? Are we setting policy? I think if more people had sensible thoughts and had sensible frameworks, I think that this can move the needle in a positive direction. So thank you for joining me and hope you enjoyed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rabbi Ari.
Yes.
While background checks are required,
Background, yeah.
while they're required, they read it, and it's like, we're good to, I said, I'm sure I have to wait. No.
They run an instant background check.
Now, to me, that's a mistake. And it's spoken of right here. There should be a waiting period.
You say waiting period.
There should be. And in other words, what if someone has a cheating spouse? What if someone has a business partner who robbed them, whatever, bankrupt?
Interesting.
So if you're in the heat of the moment, you should not, to me, you should not be able to walk out with a weapon. And it talks about cities of refuge.
Can I, yeah, go ahead. Oh, right.
Talk about
In the heat of the moment.
refuge. And one reason, they say not to sell them there is because the avenger could come to the city of refuge
in a fit of rage.
In a fit of rage and buy a weapon. And they're saying,
can I repeat what you said to the camera?
I'm sorry, what?
I want to repeat in the camera so that everyone can hear what you said.
Yeah.
What Mark is saying, he's interesting. I like your deduction. He's saying that we can deduce from the last text, which we kind of had to run through a little quickly, the one about the cities of refuge, and we're concerned about the avenger of the deceased, who in a fit of passion and rage and anger and just grief or whatever will impulsively come to the city of refuge, purchase a weapon and go take out the one who caused the death or whom the death came about through. And Mark is saying that if we extract that principle, not only should we maybe put some sort of restrictions, but maybe specifically in the sense that we look into a little bit of a waiting period, so that even if the background check comes back clean, we have a waiting period, so that if someone is in a fit of rage, passion, whatever, they have time to cool off. We may never be able to do a deep dive into everybody that wants to purchase a firearm and know exactly what happened in their life right now. But if there's a waiting period, well, then you at least are buying some time that cooler heads may prevail than otherwise. So I think what you're saying is solid. In other words, I think it's very reasonable, and I think it's reasonable based on the source. Kudos. Yeah. Again, is this great to see you? Is this saying that for sure that we're not saying anything for sure? We're just trying to extract, bring the sources, and kind of say what can we learn from this? All right, good.
I just wanted to add, this has nothing to do with control. It has to do with something else about rising up. That the IDF spokesperson and the general have been for the last couple of weeks have been regularly holding and putting out announcements, personal broadcasts of how well prepared Israel is, and warning. And so it's like, yes, we're warning them. We're exhibiting publicly the refueling process of all the planes, the And we're showing,
Great.
we're showing so that maybe Iran won't attack.
It's so interesting. First of all, it's a great point. I actually had thought about that at some point over the last few weeks. I thought about that the posturing, on the Iran is like, oh, we're going to get retribution. But Israel saying, we have the intel, we have the capabilities, like you can try, but it ain't happening. That can also act as a deterrent, which at the end of the day saves lives on every side, and it's only a good thing. Correct. Strong deterrence, which, as you're pointing out, can be achieved through PR, right? In many ways. I mean, hopefully, like nothing actually happens and the loss of life does not continue. That's the ultimate goal. But like, if this is the way to go about it, I agree with you. I think that's I think it's strategic, and it may be a brilliant strategy, as opposed to allowing the other side to think that they have a chance, they can catch you by surprise, and then they try it, and then you counter. Again, who wins by that whole cycle, by all those cycles? No one wins. It's not a good thing. No one is looking for loss of life. That's crazy. So yes, if there's more a sense of like, you probably don't want to do that because it's not going to end well, and then they don't. Great. That's good for everybody. Literally good for everybody.
Yeah, it's a great policy.
Good to see you, Mom. Deborah, great to see you. Larry, it's still sunny by you. That's unbelievable. 6:18 p.m. Middle of the day. Look at that. Great to see you, Yasher Koach and Ray. It's great to join. Oh, I see there's a chat. Oh.
Hi, Ray.
Oh, yeah. I see you texted about a book. No, there's not a book, but we do have the
PDFs.
The PDF. Okay, awesome. Good to see you guys. I'm going to close out. Laila Tov. See you guys soon.
Thank you.